So again, thank you. Eric Sanders with eCloud. We're going to talk today about Windows SQL 2008 and end of support. It finished last Tuesday on July 9th. And we're going to walk through what's next. What options do you have, and what capabilities do eCloud and RiverMeadow coupled together have to be able to give you options to upgrade your Microsoft SQL 2008 workloads and applications. So eCloud, we are a minority-owned hybrid cloud solution integrator. We help customers figure out what should move to the public cloud, what IT functions should move, and really help you figure out how to best utilize the public cloud, looking at assessments, POCs, migrations, day 2 managed services, and of course, cost optimization. Michael Kent, you want to give a quick overview of RiverMeadow?
Sure, Eric, thank you. So RiverMeadow is a technology partner for eCloud. We come in with tools and services to augment the transition of those workloads from one place to another, typically. Migration, a little bit of evolution to those workloads that you'll see here today, some of the features and capabilities that our product and service team has to offer.
Thank you. So a little bit of breadth and depth of eCloud. We can help you from a cloud colo connectivity standpoint. We have access to over 1,400 data centers across the world. So if you're looking for that on-ramp to the public cloud, we can help you with that. Everything from IaaS, PaaS, and SaaS. Hosted voice, again, a full range of managed services. Ability to have global coverage. If we need on-site support, we have the ability to be able to provide that. And then, of course, voice, internet, WAN solutions, again, being able to help you with connectivity between offices and, of course, between clouds and on-ramping to the public cloud. Again, full range of managed services, really everything from the data center to the desktop, being able to help you detect, notify, remediate, moves, add changes for things that are on-prem, as well in this hybrid world with things in the public cloud. So, Michael, I'll move this over to you, let you take it from here.
Sure. And so, Eric, in your practice, what we talk about is making that journey to the cloud. And when is the right time? And what are some of the inflection points that you'll come across? You accepted this webinar looking at one of those particular inflection points. Windows 2008, SQL 2008 is going out of support. Now, what are my options and what can I do with it? But there are others. A lot of people use the expiration of their leases for their data centers as an opportunity to reevaluate their positioning. And is the cloud the right thing for me? How much cloud, et cetera. Integration of acquisitions. So M&A activity is another trigger that we see causes companies to look at how am I going to divest? How am I going to incorporate a company's assets into my assets? There's no point in having two sets of everything. Expansion. Probably one of the strongest use cases for cloud is this on-demand ability to spin up an elastic amount of capacity to meet your need. And when done right, control those costs as well as dynamically retract that capacity without having to pay for it for the next 3 years. So if you're going into your business is expanding and going into a push for an expansion of a product or what have you, you don't have to keep that capacity as that push, as the wave subsides and you get back to normal run rate. That elastic capacity is available. Software and hardware refresh, again, probably the second biggest use case we see in our practice of when someone's going to evaluate the cloud. It is when my equipment is old, it's time to get new equipment. Do I buy the equipment? Do I rent the equipment? Do I just have it hosted somewhere, et cetera? eCloud solution offers a great ability to come in and help you assess that positioning, if you will. And RiverMeadow comes in with a set of technology and services to help manage transitions between where you are and where you need to go. Security threats, of course, are always an opportunity. if you're exposed or if you don't have access to the technology stacks that you need to quickly secure yourself, this can happen if a company has turned a corner. Security, in my view, has always been a factor of two important elements, and the first is exposure. How well do people know me? So the bigger my name, the more I'm exposed, the more I become a target for malicious activity. And then, of course, paranoia. I don't have to be particularly well known. If my CIO and my CEO are worried, then I'm worried, kind of thing. So we recognize both. And what we're talking about here today is compliance. Is my infrastructure compliant with PCI, HIPAA, or any of the other standards, Sarbanes-Oxley, et cetera? If you're not compliant, we know that the auditing fails, the audits are expensive, the remediation for the audits are expensive, the fines, if you can't remediate, are expensive. And so that's often a big trigger. Application innovation and software end of support, which software end support is partly a compliance issue. It's also a management issue, right? And then the application innovation is really, I need to do better. I've now made a mobile app. I need to dramatically change the way that my infrastructure runs to support that new application, or that new service, or that new endpoint, or what have you. These are different inflection points along your technology road map that will beg the question, is this the right time to move to the cloud? Next.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. A couple of things to add to that. When we do these application assessments, we see on average customers' environment utilization is somewhere between 3 and 7%. So being able to move off of your infrastructure to the public cloud, now you have the ability to right size and then be able to have auto scaling built into this implementation to be able to flex up and down as you need to. Other areas that we're seeing, leveraging the services available by those providers that are managed by the providers. And then, of course, as Michael touched on, the innovation. AWS has over 1,500 updates annually that they're pushing every day. No customer in private cloud environment will be able to keep up with that type of innovation. I'll be honest with you, it's hard for us to keep up with that innovation that the cloud providers and Amazon is pushing. But that type of innovation is available and available to you. And that's where you can lean on partners like us to be able to help you take advantage of that.
Absolutely.
So as Michael mentioned, we are end of support with SQL Server 2008. R2 becomes Windows Server 2008 R2 will be end of support in January 14. So for the people that are on the phone that have those 2008 Windows Servers R2 that are coming up, what is the plan? And what options do you have? And we'll be able to walk through more of that today. So what are the impacts? So the impact to your organization is that there are no patches for known security vulnerabilities. So as you continue to be on an unsupported environment, as those security threats continue to mount, you will have no patching availability available. Of course, no support from Microsoft, heavy costs from an internal compliance and being able to keep up with that, especially if these workloads and applications are in production. Bless you. So what are your options? Of course, the first option is to just do nothing, right? Take no action and run the risk of the impact of your organization. Available 3 years free extended support in Azure. We do put that in quotes that it is free. We believe that that could change over time, but Azure is offering 3 years of extended support. Of course, you have the option to upgrade in the cloud. So as you're looking from a private cloud to the public cloud, we'll walk through a demo of what that looks like. But you have the ability to upgrade as you're migrating to a new environment, whether it's on-prem or whether it's to the public cloud. And then, again, talking about the automation and the OS upgrade capability that we're going to show you later.
Yeah, and here, so one thing I wanted to add here is, so the 3 years extended support is a great option, of course, but you're not really moving forward. You're delaying the inevitable, right? So you still have technical debt that you're going to have to retire at some point, and what what we're hoping that you see out of this presentation today is a way to both do the transition and retire some of that technical debt in the process. So, 1 + 1 = 3 kind of thing. When we talk about that, we also know that each of these clouds have their own quirks. This is definitely a situation where RiverMeadow and eCloud can help you understand which cloud is the right cloud. AWS by and far has a broad scope of services that they offer. However, if you have a preference, we can help you determine the best way to get there. In particular, as it pertains to this, we know that there's still millions of Windows 2003 machines out there. No one likes to admit it, but we find them everywhere we go. AWS will take those. We can upgrade those. You can't get extended support for Windows 2003 in Azure. So there's all of these caveats that have to be evaluated, and that's really where a partner like eCloud Solutions can come in and help you understand that landscape, put a disposition behind each of those systems. This is going to be rewritten, this is going to be modernized, this is going to go to a data lake, etc., and reshape your environment as you do these transitions. So not just fix the existing problem, but really position you for springboarding forward.
So as Michael mentioned, 2003 and 8 are all things that are available on all the public clouds, especially Amazon. One thing to note, we run into customers that have a heavy Microsoft workload environment, and their first reaction is, well, I'm going to move to Azure. Well, what we always want to make sure we educate them with is that 57% of all public workloads, Microsoft workloads, run in AWS, while only 30% of all public Microsoft workloads run in Azure. So the innovation that the public cloud providers are putting behind this, especially AWS, is very apparent, and because 57% of all the workloads run in their cloud. So as you land in these workloads in the public cloud, you will have options, and you will continue to see innovation and additional support for other Windows-type processes and workloads from an AWS, as well as you would from an Azure.
Yeah, and on this one, Eric, so we released a few months ago the capability to move from 2008 forward, it being the most important milestone from that perspective. We now support the full breadth from 2003 to 2016. What's important about this capability is your source is retained, so there is no destruction to that source environment, right? So we make a copy, we upgrade the copy, and allow you to run through your UAT testing, your compliance testing, et cetera, to make sure that's what you intend. Your rollback is always as easy as just repointing back to the original server, and you're right back to where you started. So it's about as safe and de-risked a process as we can manage on your behalf. We started with the operating system, and of course our next releases will show similar automation, not just moving SQL to newer versions, but also to platform as a service, right? So you'll see we start with technologies and processes, and we write those into managed code. So what we've done here, you'll see in a moment, is that ability to manage that process of that upgrade as you move, and you can expect even more options in the next couple releases over the summer. So let me set this up for my partner in crime here, Greg Dennis, and he'll walk you through this capability. We have IPO is an in-place upgrade. As I mentioned, as you transition to Azure, as you transition to AWS, or for that matter, we can run this on-prem. We make a copy of that workload, that server OS. We do an in-place upgrade, as it is the safest and retains the most of the identity of that server, your applications, your registries. We do not speak to the application compatibility. That's why we allow you to stop along the way. So if you're on 2003 and you know your application is 2008 compliant, you can move to 2008 and at least get some support, right? At least get current with the end of support agreement that Microsoft has. And then you can test that application on 2012. If it works, keep going. Or you can go from 2003 all the way to 2016. That's really up to you. A lot of times you want to make some changes along the way. Move to 2008, incorporate some new features, move to 2012. All of these are possibilities through some automation that we've deployed in the tool. We also have a set of services around helping you get there if you don't have the staff or the hands. And that's where eCloud and RiverMeadow can really support those transition efforts. Okay, Greg, I guess I will turn it over to you.
Perfect. Thanks, Michael. Good morning, everybody. So first things first, I'm going to see if I can share my screen. That's always a wonderful thing. So let's see if I can take over and let me know when you can see my screen, and let me know which screen you see, because I've got 2 monitors set up here.
We're seeing the slide deck.
You are? Okay. Thank you very much. So I'll just move this over to this screen and we'll maximize that. Let me know if you can see the Windows 2003 machine in front of you.
I think we're still seeing Eric's screen.
Okay. Eric, is there a way that you can relinquish control so I can share my screen?
Yeah, I'm gonna.
Thanks. Perfect. And then housekeeping, I dropped a note into the chat. As we're going through this, I have a tendency to talk quickly. So if I'm talking too quickly, just tell me to slow down. If there's any questions that you will have, we'll do our best to answer these in real time. One of the things that sort of will come up, my guess, is the support for Windows Server 2019. This is going to be available in a subsequent release. So this is something that's in our immediate future. So as Michael said, you'll be able to go from 2003 all the way to 2019. As long as you've got the application compatibility support. We have decided to focus strictly on, just trying to share my screen and talk at the same time here. Let me know if you can see it. This window's being shared. Anything, Michael?
I don't see it yet.
No luck? Okay, let's try one more time. Let's try this and that. And the screen is being shared. Do you see it yet?
We can.
Perfect. Thank you. So we've decided to focus on 64-bit here. So there's no support right now for 32-bit architectures. The reason for that is quite simple. There's no support for Microsoft across, which means you can't go from a 32-bit version of Windows to a 64-bit version of Windows using In-Place OS upgrade. The In-Place OS upgrade that you're going to see is basically a Microsoft best practice. So we've taken their existing tools and techniques, we've applied them to our lift and shift technology. So I'll take you through the demo. But again, if there's any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat, and Michael will be able to answer them. And if not, we can sort of chat about them if they're sort of worthwhile going to. So I've recorded this video, and the reason for that is that there's obviously quite a bit of white space that exists within these migrations. We often advise our customers to start these migrations toward the end of the business day. We have a full scheduling capability within our product, so there's no need for you to sit here and watch this migration process happen. It's quite boring, to be quite honest with you. So we've tried to accelerate some of that white space in this video so that we can truncate this to around, I think, about 6 minutes or so for the video. And that way we try to keep everyone's attention. So my source, as you can see, what I'm starting here with is a Windows Server 2003 R2. This is, again, 64-bit in its Service Pack 2. This particular workload, as you can see, was running inside of AWS and pretty lightweight in terms of its CPU and memory requirements.
And Greg, so is that important? Does it have to be running in a specific place for the upgrade to work?
No. In terms of cloud support today, we have support for Azure, as well as AWS, as well as vSphere, as well as vCloud.
What about source? It doesn't matter where my source is? No.
So source can be Hyper-V, KVM, Xen. We are source agnostic. It can be a physical server. All of the work that we do is on the target. So Michael talked about de-risking this process because there's people that are out that have different sort of schools of thought around in-place OS upgrade. And what our perspective on this is that we're doing this work as a smoke test to a target clone. That way we're never impacting the source. It stays running. Your users are never impacted. There's no disruption to business. And we can test all this stuff on the actual target.
Great.
Thanks.
Thank you.
So we'll go through the process here. I'm going to pause the video at certain aspects just so I can sort of speak to some different things. And once we cut away from this screenshot of this source machine, you'll get our first glimpse into the RiverMeadow UI. Okay. So this is our SaaS portal. The way that we sort of work is you purchase entitlements, and entitlement allows you to do a migration. We don't charge any extra money for in-place OS upgrade. So if you try this and it doesn't work, it's still available to you at no cost. It's part of the overall package. When you do purchase entitlements, it's based on the number of machines you want to migrate. And we give you a registration package through email that allows you to log into this portal. We have several modules that we're not really focusing on for this webinar. We're going to really get to the heart, which is the in-place OS upgrade. So we're going to focus on the migrate module only for this purpose. So here I'm going to go into the migrate module. And the first thing that we need to do is to add a source machine. So today we identify a source based on operating system. And you can see here that we have a facility for bulk upload, right? So if I want to do 50, 100, 200, 1,000 of these things, I can simply use a CSV that we supply. And you just fill in the information, you can upload that, or we can add a source manually. In the demo, I'm going to add the source manually so you can see what that web form looks like.
And so, Greg, since this is a bulk upload through CSV, I can really output from an existing inventory system or CI database or something like that as well, correct?
Exactly. So, perfect. You know, we have integration with third-party discovery products. That was the other module that you saw on the home screen. And one of the things that we strive to do is to give people better insight into their workload management, understand cloud sizing, understand cloud costing, and understand OpEx before you actually commit to cloud. Understand the cost differential between reserved instances versus pay-as-you-go and that sort of thing. The output of those tools can feed right into this CSV so that you can import all of those machines directly into the platform.
Great.
Yeah. All right. So here I'm going to type in the source IP address. We interrogate the source operating system. So I'm not talking to the hypervisor, which is when Michael asked earlier, does it matter what our source is? The answer is no. If this source was running on Hyper-V, if the source was physical, if the source was KVM, Zen, it was already in AWS, it was already in Azure, Google Cloud, it doesn't matter to us because we're talking directly to that operating system. Okay, so I've tagged this with Windows 2003, and you can see that I've added this, but it hasn't been inspected yet. So the next piece of the puzzle here is to basically do what we call an inspect and migrate. So here I'm going to select the target cloud. Now, it's very typical for our larger customers to have multi-cloud, or they may have multi-region. So here, my target cloud is dictated by a piece of infrastructure that we automatically deploy called a cloud appliance. By choosing the cloud appliance here that's been deployed to AWS, it specifies the target VPC that I want to do this migration to. Okay, so but a lot of our customers have one for Azure, one for AWS, one for vSphere, or they may have 5 for AWS if they want to deploy into different parts around the world. The migration type we're going to be doing is a full migration, okay? So the other option that we have there is something that we call a data-only migration, a different use case for things like NAS consolidation. So what do I do if I've got terabytes of data sitting on a NetApp filer that's on my on-premise, but I want to move to cloud? We have the ability, if you want to move to AWS and create EBS files with that data, to be able to just focus on the data and not worry about operating systems. So it sort of decouples the data from the OS. Now we're inspecting this machine. So this migration readiness check is really what we call pre-flight, and it goes to try to satisfy all the different requirements that we need based on years and years of doing migrations to ensure that this source is ready for migration. Now I have something in here on purpose, right? So it's saying that based on how old this operating system is and the fact that it was running in AWS, I'm running this old Citrix PV Ethernet adapter, and it's just warning me that that there could be some implications with that. Okay, so I'm going to ignore that, and we're just going to go ahead and continue with the migration profile. If it was something major, we would have an error with a stop sign that would require remediation. So the next piece is building out what we call the migration profile. Think of this as the blueprint for the destined or the target machine that I'm going to build. There's the scheduler piece I just talked about. If I would have clicked on later there, we would have seen a date and time stamp, and I could have selected when I want this to run. We have very target cloud specific questions to ask here, of course. So do you want to enable EBS encryption? Do you want to add tags within AWS? Do you want to change the different disk type so that you can have a hot tier or a fast tier versus a cold tier or a cool tier? Okay, so here I'm just changing the name. I'm just calling it Windows 2000, upgrade. I've selected GP2 disk, which is SSD, the fastest one that AWS has. We're doing a block level copy, which is very important. Block level basically means that we're going to take, in our case, a volume shadow copy first, so that we have an application and a crash consistent copy of all of the data from a block-based perspective. Okay. So this usually, enlightens DBAs that they're concerned about, are you going to get all of my data? And the answer is absolutely we will. Here I'm specifying sort of the target networking requirements. If I had to have a static IP address deployed to the target, I could put that in there. I could change my instance type to whatever I want. And if we were pulling this from a discovery tool, the instance type would automatically be set to the workload output performance, which basically means that the tool decides the best instance type to use for this particular workload based on 30, 60, 90 days of evaluation is a something. It's an R4, it's an R5, and we can stipulate that or it'll detect that. I'm going to pause it here. So we've gone through and we've selected a few things here that are not really that consequential for the demo. Security groups, so that we have the right isolation on the networks or the target side. We can do things here like create an AMI or an AMI if we want to. We can report this back to Migration Hub. So we have all those different capabilities. But the most important piece to focus on for this webinar is really where I pause it here. And that is selecting what do I want this OS to be when I'm done this process. So we're going to do a full clone from Windows 2003 to the target cloud first. Once that comes up, we've instantiated the right drivers and the right cloud tools. So if it's EC2 config, EC2 install, could be the Azure agent for Windows, depending again on what target cloud you go to. If it's vSphere, VMware tools, we'll put all that in for you. And the next thing that we do is we run through a sequential series of in-place OS upgrades. So when we talk about multi-hop here, we're still following Microsoft's practice, which means that we're not jumping from, in my case, 2003 straight to Windows 2016 because it's not supported. What we will do is go from 2003 as a single hop to Windows 2008 R2, a second hop to 2012 R2, and a third hop to 2016, and then soon a fourth hop in that instance to 2019. If this source OS was already 2008 R2, which the vast majority of your workloads could be, then the selections that you'd see in this dropdown would simply be today, 2012 R2 and 2016, and eventually 2019. If it was 2012 R2 today, you would see 2016. Okay, so it's always
Greg,
the
this
next
is also
level.
this is also based on Microsoft's upgrade path. So
Exactly.
Standard can go to standard or data center, but data center cannot go backward to standard.
Exactly.
Thank you for upgrade process.
Right, and thanks for pointing that out. So you're right. My source machine here is Windows 2003 Standard, or excuse me, Data Center or Enterprise, because both of them sort of get consolidated down to a data center path. If my source here was 2003 Standard, then my selections here would be listed as 2008 R2 Standard, 2012 R2 Standard, and 2016 Standard. Okay, so we'll stay within that path. So here I decided we want to go right to the latest and greatest. We're going to assume that we have application compatibility. It's 64-bit native, all that wonderful stuff. We've done some testing with things like SharePoint and other applications, and we've seen that the applications work just fine after in-place OS upgrade. But of course, your mileage may vary. That's of course the caveat here. The nice thing is that this is a very quick smoke test when it comes to, can I move my applications to a newer operating system so I can back in support with Microsoft, so I can get security patches applied to my environment, and so forth.
And that's ultimately what we talk about when we say retire that technical debt, right? All of these systems that are out of compliance or old just culminate in technical debt. And can we retire some of that technical debt, as well as potentially right size and cloud enable these workloads?
Yeah. So the next part of our phase here is we do another pre-flight check, because one is not good enough. We want to make sure that all of the data that we just put in this web form is not going to cause any issues again or impact the migration. Nobody wants to wait 4, 5, 6 hours for a migration to complete only to find out that something went wrong along the way. So a good chunk of our intellectual property is really wrapped up in understanding the migration well enough in advance to make sure that we have a successful outcome. So the next piece gets into the real sort of nitty-gritty details, and we're working on sort of simplifying this as well. I can see that my migration is now in the queue. It's very typical, again, for customers to have dozens, 50, 100 of these things going on concurrently. It simply all just depends on the need, the timing of the project, as well as the available bandwidth that we have at our disposal. Okay, so the migration is going to start to run. We're going to take a look by clicking on this I button over here, the detailed steps that are actually going into this migration. We are working to simplify these steps. So, in the future, you'll probably only see 4 steps, to be quite honest with you, versus the 30 plus steps that you're going to see here. And the reason for that is that by having all of these steps, we inadvertently trained our customers to watch migrations, which isn't the best use of their time. So what we're going to do instead is consolidate or collapse these migration steps, because when the migration is complete, we simply send you an email about status. So whether it was complete or whether there was an issue and the migration failed, you'll get an email. The person who gets the email is the person who is logged into the SaaS platform who orchestrated or kicked off this migration. Okay. So from that perspective, like I said, it's just a better use of everyone's time to schedule these to occur whenever it makes sense for change management purposes, or based on time of day for business needs, or after batch processing, or whatever the case may be. So in my example here, I'm getting pretty decent transfer speed. We have some telemetry here, so we understand, how long did it take to complete, how much data is getting copied. So in my case, 7 minutes, I was able to move 14 gig of data at 263 megabits per second for those who care. When we do these migrations for real with customers, we establish this as a data point, because oftentimes customers want to know, how quick can I move these things? And our answer is, we don't know. The best way to find out is to actually stand up a quick POC and do one of these migrations. It's your infrastructure, it's your connectivity, it's your latency, it's your target cloud environment, etc. That'll indicate or dictate what those timings will be.
Yeah, there's always the theoretic and the actual, right? And so
sure.
There's great ways to theorize what it would take, but you never really know until you put the workload on the wire and see what you get.
Right. So you can see the different steps that we're doing here. Above, we of course already migrated all of the data across. We're injecting the appropriate cloud software, so we know this is going to AWS. We're putting in the right software, so this looks and feels like a machine that was provisioned from AWS Marketplace. Customization around things that we need to do to the operating system, and a whole bunch of other things. So you can see that right now it's very particular in terms of the different steps that we initiate. But what we get to, the important part for this conversation, is down at 22. And at 22 is when we actually start to prepare for the in-place OS upgrade. So to do that, we pull down a series of artifacts, and it's basically scripts as well as binaries that we've put together, and we've demoed all of this capability for Microsoft, and they like it as well, where we start to instrument the operating system for this. In the demo, what I tried to do in terms of giving you some visibility into what's happening on the source is inject a couple of screenshots of my machine that's running in cloud throughout this process, so that you can see it looks and feels very similar to an in-place OS upgrade that you might be performing on-premise with something like SCCM. Okay, so the first stage here is getting ready for the Windows 2008 upgrade. That's our first OS that we're going to. Now we're running that OS upgrade. We can see on screen that we have a login prompt here for 2008 R2. Not all that fancy, but that's exactly what was happening. We inject the right drivers again based on Windows 2008 as being our now new target operating system. And once that's done and we validated that we have success, we move forward with the next OS upgrade. So you can see a different sort of screenshot as to what's happening, which is I'm running my in-place OS upgrade for 2012 R2. Right after a subsequent reboot, it does the getting ready, it prepares the environment, it goes through. We again validate that it's complete. We make sure that we have the right set of software installed for 2008 R2, so you can see different versions of .NET that we're injecting. And again, the .NET isn't for us. The .NET is so that we make sure that when we do install the AWS tools, that we're using the correct underlying prerequisite software that AWS requires. Okay, so that's why you see that in there. In my case, you'll see a warning here, and that's purposeful. I already had .NET 4.8 on my source, so we skipped it. But we do have these sort of, in places where we inject information along the way if there's any type of issues. So now the next thing that we're doing here is we're preparing it for Windows Server 2016. And in terms of duration that's elapsed, you can see that some of these are taking somewhere between 15 minutes, upwards of an hour, right? So again, running these things scheduled, running at 5 o'clock, go to bed, wake up in the morning, the whole thing's done and ready for UAT. Here we're preparing for 2016, so again, much more of the same. Okay, so the nicety of being able to sort of do this and fast track this with video recording is nice versus having to watch this in real time. That one there took 29 minutes, for example.
Well, and I guess, Greg, one of the things I would say is this is super, super interesting the first 1 or 2 times you do it, but when you have 100, or God forbid you have 1,000, it's nice that it can just go through the process and you can pick it up, do your testing, and move on.
Right. So this whole thing completed in 2 hours and 20 minutes and 59 seconds, in case anyone's keeping track. And that's pretty decent considering that I just moved from on-premise, or in this case it was AWS. I moved an entire workload running Windows from a source environment to a target environment. I then ran 3 consecutive OS upgrades and all of that in 2 hours and 20 minutes. The migration summary screen that you see here just kind of goes through a couple things. So we selected full migration type. We did a block-based copy. Obviously, the outcome was a success. We did enable in-place OS upgrade, and our target version that we now are running on is 2016 data center, right? And that's the important bits. I now have also IP addressing if I want to go and actually now RDP into this machine or create or change firewall rules to allow application integration, etc. I have that visibility all from inside of our console. Okay, so we're almost there. This is just me trying to say that that's what we've done. Again, bits of data. Okay, so now we have sort of a comparison. This is me in sort of real time, even though it's recorded, logging into the target for the very first time. So I have RDP open to my source machine so that you can still see that source is up and running. It was never impacted, rebooted. It was never disrupted in any way, shape, or form. I'm logging into the target. I'll move this over, and I'll go into settings and take a look at the About tab so that we can sort of see a comparison of my system properties on my source and my system properties on my target. I have Amazon software installed. You can see that it differs from the source to the target. So we've installed different things, even though it's the same stuff, but different icons. But essentially, we have the correct drivers for all the network and storage installed, as well as the appropriate software. And that would be the same case for all target cloud. Okay, so just let this run until I can sort of find the settings. And finally go down to our system and then scroll down to About. And there we are. Okay, so this sort of completes the entire demo, our migration journey from going from source to destination. At this stage, we would start to talk about network isolation techniques. We'd start to talk about UAT process because, again, the source is still up and running. It's still serving up for customers. We also have different synchronization capability. So if we want to catch up the data that's being changed or modified from source to target, we can also set that up, and we can schedule that to run at any time of day that people need it to run. We also have something called continuous, which means you turn it on and we have always on replication going from source to target until such time as you're ready for the cutover.
Great, Greg. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. All right. So now I need to figure out how to hand back the presenter control.
Yeah, go ahead and stop sharing, and then Eric will go ahead and share.
There we go. Found it. It was on a different monitor. There we go. I've stopped sharing.
Thanks, Greg. All right, can everybody see the PowerPoint again?
Yes, sir.
All right. So, in summary, as we've talked about, the ability to retire these legacy old S's, the technical debt, being able to upgrade from 08 to 12 to 16. Again, as Michael and Greg mentioned, we can literally clone these applications, workloads, whether it's on a physical or a virtual box, and then test it in AWS and be able to see how that's actually responding. Of course, with the bulk upgrade and being able to schedule it saves time and money, minimize the security risk and the compliance that you may be facing if you are on legacy old OS solutions, as well as things that are into support. Now, again, being able to test and upgrade a new OS on your application, one thing that we really encourage is do a POC on that, because you may have an application that's running on a 2003 or 2008, and somebody may tell you during the discovery that you need to refactor or replatform that application, which is going to cost you money. This is the best way to do it, to be able to do that upgrade of multiple versions and test it in that new target environment that you're going to, AWS, Azure, wherever it may be. And of course, extend the life of your application. And again, minimize downtime, no upgrade, no disruption, and be able to upgrade to the new target environment by cloning that particular application. Michael, anything you'd add?
No, I think as I mentioned, it's a really neat process the first one or two times, but everyone has more tasks in their queue to spend their time on than doing a series of upgrades to get into a compliant state for whatever reason. So hopefully, what you saw here is a 2 hour, as Greg mentioned, 2 hour 29 minute process that we've automated to take that one task and put it into the easy bucket. And then you can take that extra time and go focus on the other tasks that don't have a great automated solution, that do require your time, your brain, your technical hands-on um, uh, to address and move those through their process as well.
And take advantage of the offers from the cloud providers. AWS is very aggressive. I mean, there's a reason they have 57% of the market share for this. They are very aggressive with giving providers like us credits to be able to run these workloads on AWS. They'll give us migration credits to be able to offset some of the costs that you may have. And we pass 100% of that on to you. Please make sure you talk to your AWS, hold us accountable to that. That is definitely a differentiator that we have versus some of our competition. And one of the reasons why the AWS guys really like to work with us, because we are transparent with those funds that we're able to pass on to you. So why we're better together, it's truly a multi-cloud approach, and I think everybody would agree that we are in a hybrid world. I mean, with the announcements of AWS Outposts, with Azure Stack, with VMware extending AWS, I think we're going to find ourselves in this hybrid cloud world. So having the ability to be able to migrate to and from anywhere is definitely a differentiator that we have together.
Eric, I also think it's important that, as you mentioned, the landscape changes every day, right? Microsoft and Oracle look like they have a joint venture going together. What does that mean to me and my licensing impact and my infrastructure? AWS is hosting probably more Oracle workloads than any other cloud provider. What does that mean for me, and how can I take advantage of that situation? How can I get these clouds to compete against each other for the benefit of my pricing? These kind of things. It really behooves folks to have an advocate, have someone that is helping them strip away the noise and come up with the right plan for where they are. Doesn't matter if it's Cloud X or Cloud Y or Cloud Z or private or hosted or what have you. Someone that can really take a look at the systems and say, here's probably the best fit for you, for your business. PCI compliance, if you can't satisfy your auditors, and we do it this way, and have options that are not just one-sided. So I think there's a huge benefit in kind of that approach, having an advocate in the cloud that can help you sort it out.
Yeah, I agree. Of course, with each of us, very easy to do business with. Very flexible with our contracts and our services, very much, a pay-as-you-go, on-demand, aligned with the public cloud. We do offer a cloud center of excellence, be able to operate and optimize as you go. That's always something that we talk about. As we're planning for this migration to the public cloud, let's make sure we have a plan of how we're going to operate and how we're going to optimize.
Absolutely important that you have those in your heads-up display as you're doing any of this work. That the optimization piece is tremendous, as you mentioned, Eric. If most people are using only 5 to 7% of their total capacity, the right sizing going into the cloud is important. But I'm sure that some sort of calculation happens to get that extra capacity. And it really has to do with this ever-changing world and how fast things move. Having something that's paying attention to that for us, saying, hey, you've dropped below a threshold. You're now only at 50% consumption of SQL Server or what have you. What do you want to do with it? And bring that back into our attention, I think is a huge benefit of kind of this modern landscape that we're moving into.
Yeah, and if you're running SQL Enterprise versus, we can find ways to, versus standard, we can find ways to help you save money if you're not taking advantage of all the enterprise functionality that's there. So there are definitely ways to better optimize. Of course, all the cloud providers are changing their programs quite a bit. The RIs is another area that customers can take advantage of once you've solidified what that environment looks like. Buy the 1, 2, or 3-year RIs and save anywhere from 30 to 50 to 60%. There are ways to further even optimize, beyond right sizing, but also from a cost standpoint.
Yeah, and scheduling also becomes important there as well, and where that cloud center of excellence is huge. Having something that helps you keep current on the best way to utilize that cloud ultimately is in your benefit. Okay, so and then when we talk about the transition, as you saw and as Greg mentioned, we're agentless. The whole idea is to be as gentle to the sources as absolutely possible. We want to be non-impactful, low risk. We want to be able to get to the actual workload that needs to be moved, not a mock-up, not we hope it's close to, but the actual workload. Make a copy, sandbox it, let you run your UAT so you actually know this application will work, or these are the changes that have to be made. Your production machines stay running. They are not impacted. We do not modify the source at all. Everything is done with a copy and a modification of the copy. The data path is a path you set. So between AWS or Azure, your target cloud, and your premise data center, you establish that network connectivity that we work against. I drop an appliance in the target environment, but I don't have any direct access to that appliance. I'm using target cloud APIs. It spins up, communicates directly to the source, pulls the data back upon itself, and so it's within your secure boundary as it does that. And then that pre-flight check that we talked about really was about driving this first delivery attempt percentage up past 90%. The idea is we check for those conditions that are known to cause issues with migration, whether it be the migration process, whether it be the target cloud. Some of the target clouds have unique support of different combinations of things, but also, as Greg mentioned, things that we've come across in the process. Batch jobs that can cause you problems, broken VSS, these kind of things. We pre-scan for all those things to get the best outcome possible with the least effort. And ultimately that saves you time and money.
And from a connectivity standpoint, I mean, if you have to spin up a new line or a circuit or whatever it may be, that could end up adding another year, 2 or 3 years to your circuit contract. We have connectivity providers that are on demand, that are month to month, that if we need to do 100 VMs and it's going to take us 30, 60 days, we can get an on-demand to the actual office, to the location, to AWS, up to 3 gigs per second, and be able to pay for that in an on-demand. Again, helping eliminate risk, helping eliminate contracts, and any lock-in that you may have with a particular provider. So that's the conclusion of our webinar. I appreciate everybody's time and support. I'll exit out of sharing my screen to see if anybody has any questions before we end the webinar.
So Eric, I guess the only question I would have is if anyone wants to follow up and make contact for taking a look at any of the services, where do you want them to go?
Yeah, you can contact sales@ecloudms.com. You can find us on all the social media, on the emails that we sent you. We'll follow up with the link to the recording with additional ways to contact us to be able to get engaged.
Sounds great. Thank you.
All right. Well, if there's no questions, we'll conclude the webinar, and we appreciate everybody's time. Thank you, and have a great day.